Hmm. All right, so here we are live with dosdude. He's come up with a solution to the 2011 MacBook Pro graphics chip issue. So just to give you all a primer on what this is, the 2011 MacBook Pro is one of the biggest piles of crap Apple has ever produced. The GPU will die if you could play 144p YouTube videos on this and do nothing else. Eventually, you will wind up with something that looks like this. 2000. It's. Yeah, let's see if there's some images on Google. Yeah, eventually your machine is going to look like one of the things that you see here. Let's see, like with all the distortion on the screen and the lines and the this and the that. Now, we used to replace the GPU on these. I had a video where I was a long time ago. Where we actually replaced the graphics chips on these. And a lot of people every single day are still asking me about this from this video that I did 5 years ago now as to why I can't replace the GPU because I showcased this GPU being replaced and it works. So why can't you do it for mine? And the thing is, for years and years, it's been very difficult to find these, and there's virtually none of these available anymore in good condition. And the people who say that they've found them in good condition are typically the people who haven't used them yet. So there are some people who've came up with these workarounds where it would disable the dedicated graphics chip and use only the Intel internal. The problem is that there were a lot of issues with these. You know, some of them, if you could reset PRAM and it would stop working. But this guy has finally found a solution to it that seems to actually be a good one. So would you just be able to introduce yourself, how you got involved in this, and how you came up with the solution?
Yeah, so I'm dosdude1, obviously. So I do have a YouTube channel, and I've done these Mac repairs for a long time. I've always been interested in it. I would just get, cheap MacBooks off eBay and try to fix them up, do board repair on them, the usual. And then, of course, I ran across the 2011 issue. So me being really inept with hardware, I love working with hardware, as you would see if you, watch my videos. So I love working with hardware, and of course, like Lewis, I started out, replacing the GPUs on these machines. And with my pretty poor equipment in comparison to Lewis's, um, it was a pain in the ass. So because I had to line it up using a flashlight and a pair of tweezers, I didn't have any fancy fancy X-ray soldering equipment, whatever. I just had a hot air station and a board preheater, and that was it. And that's what I still use, and I actually still do, a lot with that. But anyway, the dedicated GPU bypass, basically, I went through a few stages to figure this out. First, like anyone would do, I looked at the schematics of the board and analyzed them. So if you look at the board, you'll notice that there's a GMUX IC, which handles the switching between the Intel integrated graphics and the AMD dedicated graphics. And the way this works is it takes two sets of LVDS input lines from the dedicated graphics and the Intel graphics, and then it muxes them out to the display based on the preference of the system. So the first mod I did, like hardware-based mod that I did to solve this issue, was I physically ran a bunch of bodge wires to just completely bypass the chip entirely. And that actually worked pretty well. You got full graphics acceleration, you got permanently got rid of the AMD graphics, didn't even show up in the system. But of course, that mod is pretty ridiculous, and it took like 3 hours to do or something like that when I did it.
How many bodge wires are we talking here? Do you have a picture?
I do have a picture. Let's see. I do have a video about it on my channel, actually, so that would probably be the best
Okay, let's
place
find
to
that.
see it.
So which video is it that you did?
It's on my channel. Let's see. I can provide a link for you so you can post it up there.
Let's see what we have. I'm browsing right now. Do you remember when you made it?
It was probably almost a year ago at this point.
You're making me upgrading a late 2008 MacBook CPU. You're making me look bad. People ask me about this all the time. I want to make my 2 gigahertz Core 2 Duo into a 2.4. Why won't you do it? It's like, because the 2.4 gigahertz board is
I put a
80.
socket on a Mac Mini logic board. That was fun.
Steve is gonna kill me for these things, because like somebody will say, I saw somebody upgraded 2 gigahertz to 2.4 gigahertz one on YouTube. Why won't you do it for me? It's like, dude, the board is $50 on eBay. What do you want to pay me to do this? $10?
People ask me to do it too, and
I know, it's like we did it for fun to see if it was possible. We didn't do this because I'm actually gonna,
I would consider offering it as a service, but the problem is you can't find the chips in BGA form.
And like, what does this
That's
do
the
for your
problem.
CPU benchmark score? Does it bring you from 2000 to 2020 or?
I actually have an entire video about that. It actually is quite the improvement. I upgraded a 2.13 gigahertz MacBook 5,2 all the way up to the T9900 3.06 gigahertz processor.
I'll be damned.
And it's quite the improvement.
Permanently disabling the defective GPU. Here we go. Oh my Jesus Christ. Okay, so
that's the wire mod.
So what you did in this video is you just said, fuck the mux, we're just sending...
Just take it off and just put the LVDS straight from the integrated graphics into the screen. That's basically what that wire mod does.
Yeah. Okay, so this... Now, I have a couple of questions here. So the main issue that I would have with offering this, besides the fact that the amount of money somebody's going to be willing to pay for this is going to be less than what the actual employee's salary is for the time they put into doing this, at least in my case, because cost of labor is high in New York. This is not going to be the same outside of New York. What about stability? Because the main issue that I've had is somebody offers this, they have it done, and then they say, oh, it froze or did the same thing as before. Did you ever run into the system saying, hey, I still have a dedicated GPU, why isn't it working, and just flashing a black screen from this, or did that never happen?
That never happened because physically that cannot happen with the wire mod.
Okay, so there's nothing inside of here that... So which mod is it that did that? Is that the one where somebody would install Kexts and then...
No. That was
vCore?
That was the first... That's the mod on real Mac mods that I really, really dislike.
Yeah, because tell me more about that one. I don't want to shit on the guy. It's just I want to make sure that nobody does the thing that causes your machine to not work. Because I know there was one of these that turned me off to it entirely, which is you reset PRAM or something, or like you can do the mod, but it'll still make it stop working. So
okay, so let me explain that. So there's the most common way to disable the dedicated graphics on these systems, because it's the easiest way, is to set a specific NVRAM variable that tells the system not to use the dedicated graphics. I'm honestly surprised Apple included something like this, but they did, and it works until you reset PRAM. But the problem is some people tell you to remove a certain resistor on the logic board, R8911, which is the main input to the buck converter that supplies the GPU vCore rail. And the problem is when you do that, the dedicated graphics cannot work anymore at that point.
But it still has the ability to ask to be worked, does it not? Even if you disable vCore to the GPU.
That's the problem.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. So I see that you're disabling GPU vCore. So you're saying, okay, right side of the brain don't work, but you're not asking the right side of the brain to stop thinking. You have to cut off both.
But that's the goal of the NVRAM variable. That keeps the Intel graphics enabled. The problem comes when you reset your system PRAM or update your operating system to reinstall those Kexts. Immediately, first reboot after an update, it'll wipe that NVRAM variable by itself without you knowing. And then if you disable GPU vCore, you'll have a black screen, no backlight, nothing.
Okay, so my concern with offering anything like that is, we fix it. 1 week later, they update their operating system, 1-star review saying, they touch my machine, and now it goes from crashing video to no video. Ah! And
so I would never offer that repair to a customer. Okay, I never have. And I would never
this thing over here is just pure, straight up hardwired. I don't care what the system wants to use. You're always using Intel integrated. I guess the second question, this is going to show my ignorance here and hardware entirely, is if you force the machine to always use the Intel, is the Intel always putting out graphics? So
the Intel is always enabled because it's part of the PCH. That is always enabled by default.
Okay, so even if you have the dedicated graphics being used, the Intel graphics is still technically pumping out a signal. It's just not going anywhere?
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
that's cool because I didn't know
Yeah,
that. So that's a piece of knowledge that's really
yeah.
interesting. So if you
But
hardwire it, you don't have to. Now the second thing is if you hardwire. Let's say you do this hardwired mod, right?
yep.
If the dedicated GPU is running at all, does that have any capability of crashing and then even if it's not what's being used to output a picture, crashing and taking the system down? If you do the hardwired one, or no chance of that at all because there's no mux.
Only if you don't do it correctly. Part of the hardware mod is disabling GPU vCore, and if you do that, then you shouldn't have any problems.
Okay, so you could technically do this mod improperly by soldering the bodge wires on over here and then not disabling GPU vCore. So your Intel's being used, but your normal GPU is still crashing and destroying your system.
I mean, in most cases, the AMD GPU will just get power, it'll run in the background, and it won't do anything. It'll just be creating heat and wasting your battery, basically. Um, but only in extreme cases will the GPU actually physically short out. I have seen that happen before, um, but it's very rare, and if that does happen, the system will just stop booting.
Okay,
So,
but
of
this is
course, the
so
best option.
if somebody is just for the sake of it that wants to completely get rid of the AMD GPU, they could do this little mod over here and never have to worry about the AMD GPU crashing ever if they actually wanted to hardwire every single LVDS data line and DDC line. Is that what you did here? Is this LVDS
Yes,
DDC and LVDS clock and then
LVDS.
LVDS picture?
Yes, LVDS clock, LVDS picture, and then there's a DDC selector. There's like a separate mux for the DDC lines,
Yeah, you just
and you
bypassed
just
the
pull
mux
them
for
high
DDC for
on.
screen detection.
Yes,
That's awesome.
you ask the DDC mux to route the DDC control lines to the Intel graphics,
That
and that's what
is
the Gmux IC does when you switch graphics too. So
That's pretty impressive that you took the time in to figure this out. Now, the next thing is I saw you have two different websites here for yourself: the Compute Code Demux MuxHat software and the
yes,
dosdude's personal web server. So, tell
yeah.
me what the difference is between your MacBook Pro GPU disabler.zip here and the one that you buy a license key for, and give me an idea of what the evolution of your programming was here from the beginning to the end. What changed? What improved? And where you are now.
Okay, so essentially, the MacBook Pro DGBU disabler program, all that does is just apply the NVRAM patch, and I also added a little launch daemon to make sure that if you did do a system update, the graphics kex for the AMD video card would be removed by automatically for you, and that prevented, the issues where the dedicated graphics would get re-enabled and you'd be back to the same issue. But it wasn't perfect, obviously, and for the most part, it didn't really work all that well, and it's not something I would give as a repair for a customer. However, the DMUX firmware, as I call it, or the custom GMUX IC firmware that I developed, that is completely different. That basically what that is a completely new custom firmware that you physically program onto the GMUX IC, which, as I mentioned before, is what handles the graphic switching. And basically, my firmware, what it does is it disables GPU vCore without having to modify the board in any way, because GMUX has access to the enable lines for all the GPU vCore rails, and actually there's two other GPU rails that it has control over. So I have those disabled. I have the LVDS lines permanently routed out to the screen from the integrated graphics, so that's taken care of. I also have the backlight PWM line wired high. And the reason I do that is because um, at this point, I'm not sure how to produce and control a PWM signal for the backlight brightness. But for right now, just pulling it high,
All right,
keeping it
so
at
so
max all the time is
that
fine.
modification gives you max brightness.
Yes, but so does the wire mod. So it's basically the wire mod, but without the wires. It's because the wires were bypassing the chip. This firmware is reprogramming the chip.
Okay, so now tell me what the difficulty is behind getting brightness to work.
So essentially, the system has control over the GMUX IC via a low pin count I/O bus, and the problem with that is I lack the knowledge of implementing that in an FPGA. And for those of you who don't know what an FPGA is, basically it means a field programmable gate array. And essentially all it is a array of thousands of transistors, and your job is to program them and tell them what to do. That's all an FPGA is. So basically, if I were to implement an LPCIO interface on an FPGA, it would require um, quite a bit of knowledge that I currently don't have, but I'm researching into it. So eventually I'll probably be able to figure it out. But at this point, it's a little bit over my head, so I'm not exactly sure
So you
how to
rewrote the
implement the
firmware for
LPCIO.
the Mux chip that has virtually no documentation to allow it
It
to
had
work
no
without the
documentation.
GPU.
I basically had to dig through a bunch of ridiculous guides in the Lattice Diamond software, which is the programming software you use to
Tell me a little bit
write
more
the
about this
software.
Lattice software, by the way, before I circle back to the fact that you figured this out on your own. So tell me about this Lattice programmer that you are recommending for doing the job.
Yeah,
So
so the Lattice programmer is designed to program Lattice branded FPGAs, which is what the GMUX IC is. The GMUX IC is a Lattice LFX-P2 FPGA. And what the programmer is a proprietary, well, it was cloned by the Chinese, which is the one I have, but it's a proprietary programmer that is designed specifically to write the FPGA programmer onto those, or the FPGA program that you write onto that chip. And essentially, they also have a special IDE like software that you use to write the FPGA program. And that is written in Verilog, which is a very confusing language. But yeah, you write the program in Verilog, you synthesize it, and you write it onto the chip via the Lattice programmer. And that's basically the development process that I went through.
So you figured out how to redo the entire firmware from scratch, rewrite the firmware with no documentation.
Yes, exactly.
Wow. Okay, and the So what are you charging for the license keys here for the for this for people who want to do this on their own?
So the license keys cost $20 a piece, and the only reason I'm charging for this type of thing is just because of the immense amount of time I
Because you
put into
wrote the
developing
firmware
it.
from scratch. Don't explain
Yeah.
yourself, okay?
Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
You
Some
wrote the
people,
fucking firmware from scratch. I'm not blaming you. So the all right. So it looks like you can get this programmer for $20. They
you
pay
get the
you 20
programmer
bucks.
for $20 from China.
So for
Yes.
$41, if somebody's got some soldering experience, they can do this themselves.
Yes. And I'm actually working on a non-soldering version of this, which is basically like a pogo pin connector that I designed. And that's gonna be. I'm still in the development process of that, but so far it's working. But
How would the
once I
pogo
get
pin
those
connector
done,
be? Because how would is it how are they going to connect that to the board?
um, basically what a pogo pin is like a little spring-loaded connector,
Thank you, Megan.
and essentially, actually the best example for these, those little like grounding tabs on the bottom of like all MacBook motherboards.
Yeah.
Those are pogo pins, and basically what I'm using is very small versions of those, and then you're gonna take a custom board with those pogo pins in it, press it onto the 6 pads on the JTAG header on the board to program the GMUX, and then you just program it with my software.
Okay, so they would be holding that with their
Yes.
index finger or something. All right, that was
Yes,
the
just
part that
hold it very
was the bit.
still, and it works. It's a
Now,
little finicky right now. I want to get it a little bit more stable before I release it, but it
now,
works,
is there any
and it's
possibility that
coming.
an OS update can rewrite the FPGA or no?
Nope, it is the system has no programming interface to that chip at all.
Okay, so just to be clear, because I was going to potentially criticize Apple here and say why if you can figure out how to bypass the GPU, why can't they just push out a firmware update? So you're saying that there's no way for the machine to program its own graphics mux?
Actually,
Because
thinking through that,
I
there
know with the
was
2008 model they reprogrammed the mux
yes, there
because of
was a
some.
2008 model firmware update for the GMUX chip. So there is so based on the schematic, this is what I've determined. It's connected to what interface was it? I forget. I think it's connected via I2C to the PCH No, it's not IS2C. It's something else. But there is an interface that they could use to program the chip. And I actually looked into this and tried to interface with it myself, but the API is just so locked down. There wasn't much I could do.
That's understandable.
But
Because so my question is there a way that potentially in a future update that this could get wiped out and you would have to reprogram it?
Potentially, but the chances of that happening are next to none. I mean, Apple hasn't released a firmware update for this machine in so long. They're not going to waste their time helping customers by releasing a firmware update that disables half the machine.
Yeah, I thought they wouldn't release an OS update in 2018 that would stop screens from working on machines from 2013 just because of EDID codes. But
Yeah,
Apple. So yeah, this is pretty cool.
you know, those types of things. Those types of things just provide me a nice challenge. I love getting around those types of things.
Me too. It's just I have 10% of your brain, so I can't. So what are you studying? Anything related to computer science, hardware engineering,
Yeah,
software?
I'm in computer science at a college right now, so that's what I'm studying
How
for the
far
most
into it are
part.
you?
Next year will be my last year, and then I'll be done.
How old are you?
I'm currently 21.
21, and you've already reprogrammed this chip from scratch with your own firmware, not a hack, to do what Apple couldn't do. So,
Yes.
So technically, here's the thing: if they could reprogram that mux, the same way that the 2008 mux was reprogrammed when there was flickering issues, they could get rid of they could help a lot of people that have this GPU issues. I mean, if a 21-year-old student could figure this shit out in their dorm room, there's not much keeping them from just saying, yeah, I know we kind of screwed up and released a machine that keeps failing. Here's a little push to just, allow it to work. And they
Yeah,
don't do
if
it.
only they do that. That would be great.
That kind of sucks.
And they have professional FPGA programmers, so they could very well do it.
Yeah, no, this backlight PWM stuff that you're not able to figure out, like that's probably 30 minutes of payroll for them for their engineering team.
Yes, probably.
Yeah, because the boards that they had worked on, you could always tell because they have a black sticker over the serial number on the RAM, and they look like shit. I mean, I used to think that when I look back on this, not that I'm any good with BGA, the entire reason I got this fancy X-ray thing is because if you've watched my channel for any length of time, you know I can't solder a chip on straight to save my life. So I still was actually putting them on not straight with this machine, which is something only somebody as stupid as I am could do. But even after this entire process, the bottom of the board, the CPU area would look the same as the GPU area, whereas on the boards that Apple had done, the entire area under the GPU was brown. It just looked like something that had been. It just looked like toast that you forgot about while you were in the shower.
I know. I've noticed that.
Yeah. So even though they were giving people freebie repairs, I don't know what process they were using, but they must have been trying to run this entire profile in like 3 to 4 minutes in order to burn the boards that badly. So it would be nice
to give them credit though. If the chip they actually were putting on was actually something that worked, it would probably be fine. But the fact that the AMD chip itself is defective is just, regardless of how good of a soldering job you do, it's just not going to work.
So what are the issues with that AMD chip? Why is it defective? Maybe you know something I don't, since you seem more.
I'm not like too inept with that, but from what I understand, it has to do with the underfill material used on the GPU die, and basically the material that bonds the GPU die with its little substrate PCB. That's the issue, and basically it's the same issue that at least from what I understand, the same issue as the old 8600M GT chipsets. But NVIDIA actually revised those, and those are good now. But the AMD ones still have bad underfill, and basically what that causes is when it gets hot, it turns into basically a goo, almost a liquid, and it causes the little microscopic bumps that bond the die to the substrate to move out of position. And basically, that's what causes the GPU failure.
Yeah, one of the interesting things is that
but basically that's what I understand.
When people say that it's the solder balls, they don't not understand this underfill thing around the chip. One of the things I would say is you can heat the chip to a point where it will not melt solder. You can heat the chip to 120 Celsius for 5 minutes, and it'll work again. And that solder's
Yeah,
not melting at 120 Celsius, but
exactly.
the underfill's moving around. And what's interesting
The
here, what's very
underfill is
interesting to me,
melting. Yes.
is this chip is such a pile of garbage that in the 2012 MacBook, the exact same heatsink, the exact same fans, the exact
Yes,
same
that's what
case
I
used,
tell people.
and the chip has a TDP in the 2012 that's 10 watts more than this. So it's using 10 watts
Yes.
more power with the exact same heatsink, and you
And
never
I've
see an
never
820
once seen
3330
those
die.
fail.
Yeah, but this
Yeah.
piece of
Even
crap
on the
dies like
retinas.
crazy. Great job, AMD.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
know.
I'm gonna have a bunch of angry AMD fanboys in my comment section now.
That's what happens. But who
Anyway, I think
cares?
it's
The chip is defective. That's a fact. There's nothing. There's no proof otherwise. Basically.
yes. How can people find you and give you money for the license key, for the software, for service? Where are the other places people can find you? Because I see you have a YouTube channel here, dosdude1, which has way too few subscribers, and you have computecode.d. Compute
Yeah, that's
code.
basically.
I'm
So the computecode.de website is actually a friend of mine's webpage. And he and I have been, working on these electronics projects at a college. He's a friend of mine, who goes to my college, and he and I have been working on all this stuff. Like, basically, we wrote the entire flashing software that you use for the custom GMUX IC firmware. We, developed that together, and we developed the other boards that we designed together, and that's what that web page is. So that's the stuff we co-designed. The stuff on my web page is stuff that I've done on my own.
All right, so there's your channel, dosdude1, and then there's your personal website, dosdude.com.
dosdude1.com, yes.
And then there's computecode.de/dmux.
Yes.
Oh, this is. When did you start working on this, on these things, or become aware of these problems?
I've been aware of them for a long time, but it's only recently that I've started to really do stuff about them, other than replacing the GPU. So yeah, it's basically, I'd say I've been working on these for probably about a year. With regard to the GPU bypass stuff, probably about a year.
Wow.
But I have been doing BGA soldering for at least 3 to 4 years at this point.
Yeah, that's really impressive. Anyway, thank you very much for taking the time to talk. I'm gonna post this.
Yeah, of course. I'm glad. I appreciate you having me on.
Edit this, post it to the main channel, and hopefully people stop asking me to fix this machine.
Yeah, people
what are you
still
charging
ask.
to do the whole job in case somebody actually wants the entire thing done? I don't want to solder stuff and put it on my board and.
Yeah, because it won't work. I mean, you replace the chip, it's not going to work. So.
But like, if somebody wants you to do all this, like, they don't want to buy a programmer from China. They don't want to solder the wires to their board and download the software and pray that it works. What do you charge?
Yeah, and I usually
all included as a service?
Yeah, when people send those in to me, I usually charge around $60. It's not a very long process for me, of course. You just solder some wires on there, flash it, and you're done. So yeah, $50 or $60 is a decent price for something like that, I think.
And you're adding, is that free shipping? You're adding shipping on top, I hope.
I add shipping on top of it,
Good.
but I accept either just the board itself or the whole machine, whatever you want.
I was being protective of your wallet there. I heard potential. All right, so all right, so, and if people wanted to send you the board so that you could do it, how do they contact you? Did they just contact you through this website, an eBay listing, or some other thing?
You can contact me through my webpage. I do have my email address on there. You can also, there's an email address on the DMUX webpage, which you can use too. Or you can just message me on YouTube or whatever. Just basically anywhere I am, you can message me. But keep in mind, I'm quite busy, obviously, and I don't have time for a ton of repairs. So if you have questions about, walking yourself through the process, I can definitely help with that. That'll probably be the best option because it'll take me a little while to get to repairs just because of time constraints.
What if instead of charging $60 for it, you charged $110 for it, and then had somebody else help you with it?
I mean, I could, but I don't have the means to employ another person at this time. But maybe in the future that would be something.
Because I get 15 to 20 people a day calling and emailing about this, like minimum 15 and 20, just nonstop, constantly, and so I imagine the demand is there.
The demand is there, that's for sure.
But I'm
But what
overflowing in liquid damage.
my end goal with this is to get repair shops to be able to do this. That's the whole point of the $20 per flash thing. That's just so I can make a little bit off of it. But if a ton of repair shops, got the programmer, got the software and flashed machines, it's a 15 to 20-minute process, if that, and it works every time, except, for those 17 inches that I still need to work out. But once I get that all worked out, 15 to 20 minutes works every time, and, it's a good repair for what it is.
So tell me about this is the last thing I almost forgot. Sorry, I forgot to ask you about this. So when it comes to bulk licenses, so let's say a repair shop wants to offer this as a service using your firmware. Are they, if a repair shop wants to offer this as a service using your firmware, are they going to, do they pay $20 a pop per customer they have? Do they get is it like volume licensing like Microsoft? Have you not thought through this yet because you're just trying to pass finals without flunking, and this is just for beer money, or what's going on there?
Yeah, we do give discounts, pretty steep ones at that, up to about 45 to 50%, depending on how many you want. Yeah, we haven't thought it through that much, but for the demand we have, we can offer up to 45 to 50% if you order like 100 or more or something like that. So
have you put any protection in here to this point, to where if somebody buys one license key that they just can't use it a million times to
yes, that has been well thought through. The DRM is very, very strong on this program.
So somebody can't just like buy one and just use it willy-nilly?
No, it's actually locked down to the point where if you use it on one machine, you can't even enter the key on another.
Okay, so your model to make money off of this would not necessarily be, I'm going to fix them and hire some jackass to solder these in my next to me in my dorm room. It's, I want to get other repair shops doing this so that every time they get a customer for this, I get $5 or $10.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So that's just so, I'll continue development of it, of course, and make it better. I'll always have more updates for it, and, it'll only get better. And, I think just a few bucks here and there for each repair is decent. And is, something that isn't too much, because this is my first time offering something that's paid. Usually, actually, up to this point, every piece of software I've ever released has been just free. You can do whatever you want with it. So it's a new experience, but I think it's worth it just because of the amount of time I spent on this.
Yeah, it's one thing when you're messing around trying to figure something out. It's another when you're trying to reverse engineer firmware with zero documentation and zero help from anybody.
Yeah,
it's a different level of engagement, or a different amount of effort that you have to put in it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, now what are you doing to advertise this so that the tens of thousands of repair shops that are getting bombarded with this know you exist? Because I didn't know you existed until about 20 minutes ago, and that's fucked up in terms of being able to market this.
Oh, really? Yeah, I've actually been in your Discord for quite a while, but basically the only place that I usually advertise this type of stuff is on my YouTube channel, which I have one video about it. And then I'm in like various Apple groups around, like on Facebook and whatnot, which of course doesn't get that many people wanting to do this type of stuff, but it has actually been a decent amount for my time constraints, at least. But at some point, when I'm done with school, I'll have plenty of time, and then I'll probably advertise more and open it up to more outlets.
Yeah, because I mean, stuff like this, or even people like you who have your brain, are going to be required when it comes to figuring out things in terms of SMC reprogramming, or even any of this T2 chip nonsense that's coming up ahead. I envision a world where I have to read programming from the old screen and program the new screen so it thinks it's the old screen if I just want to do a screen repair. And
yeah,
so there's we need to have more people with a brain actively involved in figuring this stuff out, and I'm definitely not one of those. My last question for you: have you ever considered taking on the challenge of fixing Paul Daniels's eternally buggy and faulty software?
Honestly, I've been using his software and haven't encountered much of an issue with it at all.
You must be lying.
I use it for all my board views.
Bill O'Reilly style. You're up. You're done.
No, I've used Open Board View for a long time. Honestly, I actually held off on it for a while. I kept using Landrex under Wine on OS 10.
Duke
But then
still
I switched
uses
to Open
Landrex
Board
to this
View.
day because he doesn't trust Open Board View.
No, I have noticed a little. Honestly, I think it's down to the board view files themselves, but a little incongruencies between the schematic and the board view itself. But I haven't had any problems with the software per se, so I think it's good. I've been using it for a while.
Time to delete this interview and DDoS your website. That's it for today, and everybody watching, do check out dosdude1 on YouTube. It's a very good channel, and life is not the fact that the channel's run by people with a brain have 12,000 subscribers, and the channel's run by people without a brain of 800,000 is part of life being not fair. But hopefully, it can be made a little less unfair with this video. So thank you for watching, and as always, I hope you learned something. All right, so that is the